We've got a great lineup of speakers this morning. First up, we have Jamie Cudden, who's the Smart City Programme Manager with Dublin City Council. Jamie, as a leader of Dublin City Council's Smart City Programme, Jamie established the Smart Dublin Regional Initiative in 2015, successfully implementing large-scale challenge-based innovation programme, working with over 40 companies, tackling areas such as last-mile delivery, smart mobility hubs and flood monitoring. He represents Dublin on Smart City Alliances, including the Harvard Tech Innovators Forum, Wireless Broadband Alliance, Cities Today Institute and MasterCard's City Possible Initiative. Jamie Cudden, you're very welcome and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks, Connor. That's great. There's a pretty cool stage there. Really impressive setup for this week, and exciting to hear the range of events that you have planned. So I'm going to really talk a little bit about some of the work that we're doing in Dublin City Council on the Smart City Programme. You know, what I'm seeing in the latest trends in smart cities and smart mobility. Going to touch on the COVID-19 crisis and some of the data we're seeing emerging from the smart city sensors and applications around the city, and maybe food for thought in terms of what's coming down the line in some of these innovations. And you know, as I'm speaking here, you can see the backdrop of a drone flying over the River Liffey. And when I started in my role about 5-6 years ago, we used to look at like maybe what the potential of drones were into the future. And if you fast forward 5 years, we have about 6 different teams in Dublin City Council using drones, from everything from surveying and mapping to first responder for the fire brigade, to monitoring waste management and enforcement, to environmental monitoring. So it's amazing to see how fast these technologies are growing, and the future for drones in terms of delivery, logistics, maybe even taxis, you never know, is going to move faster than we ever can imagine. So all this is creating new opportunities to solve challenges in our city. So I lead a large-scale innovation program in Dublin City Council, and really, if you think about the smart city concept, a lot of people ask me, what's this thing all about? Like, I mean, where can we see it? Is it real? And of course, like 5-6 years ago, was a lot of hype around the smart city concept. It was like big tech talking about how they could apply their solutions at scale. And it's been a bit slow to take off. But what we've seen in the last couple of years with this concept of Internet of Things, where we connect sensors and move towards a real-time connected data-driven city, we're starting to see a whole load of applications emerge across our cities. Everything from sensors that tell you when the bin is full, to river level monitors, like looking at the real-time level of a river, rainfall intensity sensors in cities. You're looking at the weather at the moment, like a storm warning. You know, how can we use this data to make better decisions, deliver better services for outcomes and services for our citizens, is really what it's all about. So this graphic really just shows that the smart city is very much real. It's really starting to take off, and I can tell you with COVID and the whole implication of that, we're going to see a massive investment in actually this type of technology to get a better understanding of what's happening across our cities. So Smart Dublin, as Connor, you mentioned, we launched it in about 2015, and it's very much a regional approach. And Smart Sandyford's a real flagship of the Smart Dublin programme. But one of the real successes, if you look at the chart here, is that this idea of creating districts that are forward-thinking and you can accelerate innovation and making it real. There's no point in me talking about technologies that exist everywhere else in the world, or in China or Singapore. We want to bring the innovation to Dublin, create new opportunities, and work with the leading tech companies, innovators, startups that are on our doorstep. So very much this district approach is differentiating Dublin as a global leader in the smart city space. And it's really important to flag that it's not about the technology. It's about actually the technology enabling us to solve challenges in our cities, from climate action to flooding, to how we manage waste, to how we manage, or promote sustainable mobility. These are really important topics, and working with communities and business, and working with I suppose the ecosystem is so important for us, and really success for Smart Dublin and smart city programs around the world is built on collaboration. And it's really about, from a Dublin perspective, we in the city or in the local authorities know what the big challenges are, but sometimes we just need a bit of help, what the technology opportunity is. We've got world leading tech on our doorstep. We have world leading research centres. We've got amazing startups. And it's really how we knit that together to create a collaboration model, to create new opportunities. And if you think about it, like if we can solve some of these big city challenges on our doorstep, it creates opportunities for companies and startups to actually create a scalable solution that can be applied to cities around the world. So the economic opportunity is massive, as well as solving some of these issues in our cities. And I think this idea of making it real is my mantra over the years. There's no point talking about it and developing long-winded strategies in terms of what we're going to do in 10 years. People need to see it now. And some of the initiatives that we've brought to Dublin over the last couple of years is, what's the future of mobility look like? We piloted a driverless shuttle for a couple of days. How would this work in a business district like Sandyford? Let's bring the technology closer and to the people to kind of understand the benefits. Let's talk about the regulation that's needed to make this happen faster, and the economic opportunity. And you can see some of the types of projects that we've deployed across Dublin to get that spark that innovation to make it happen faster. And I think I love this example. Thinking about how a bit of technology aligned with some sort of traditional physical asset, in this case a scooter or a bike, so a bit of connectivity, a bit of GPS, and all of a sudden we create a new service opportunity. And the big buzz in e-scooters, but look what's happened. Some entrepreneurs, innovators in the US have kind of fused this together and created opportunities that have created billion-dollar companies in the space of months and years. And it just shows you, like, there's a huge opportunity to create new services that we never thought of before that can really make a difference in our cities. Now, there's all sorts of challenges with these type of new solutions, but I think it's important to realize the opportunity. And I think what we're seeing is this adoption of technology. It's just moving so fast. Just think about the proliferation of e-scooters. Think about apps like TikTok. Think about all these new technologies. Think of like digital banking. It's just moving faster than we can ever imagine. And this curve of adoption is creating opportunities, but challenges for cities and governments and regulators that we also need to be conscious of. And I do think COVID-19, it wasn't like acceleration wasn't happening fast, but I think from a consumer perspective and a private sector perspective, acceleration was moving quite at pace. But for cities, in terms of public sector and local authorities, this COVID-19 pandemic has just transformed us in a way we could never have imagined. Moving to remote working, adopting more digital services, even doing everything through Teams or Zoom. It's just changed the whole way we work, and I think there's no going back in terms of this transformation. And I guess it's up to governments and cities to figure out how we can make sure that it's positioning ourselves in a really opportunistic way in the midst of a crisis. And some of the discussions we're having with cities around the world is the way we manage cities. Everything we know about cities, the data we have on cities, the historical patterns, the trends, you may as well rip it up. It's all changed dramatically. Working from home, what's the new norm? How will city centres be reimagined? What will the future business districts look like? And from a smart city perspective and this opportunity of Internet of Things, data is absolutely going to be at the heart of this. But also, from a mobility perspective, we're seeing radical shifts in terms of mobility patterns and trends. And I think, also the impact this is having on our economy is quite dramatic. The future is very uncertain. So how are we going to innovate out of this crisis and also make sure we're making the right decisions for the future? I think is going to be really, really important. And, it's a depressing picture, Temple Bar at the moment in the midst of this crisis, and the damage that this is doing to our economy is quite worrying. And as we kind of step into a new, I suppose, lockdown for the next couple of weeks, and I think it's interesting to start looking at big data and what types of data do we have to better understand the impact. And this is some interesting data from Google. You know, a lot of us have Google Android phones, and there's a huge, really interesting data coming out of these corporations that they can use for public good. And you can see at the start of the pandemic, the red line there is looking at grocery and pharmacy shopping when everyone went out looking for stocking up on toiletries and toilet roll. But you can also see the impact we've had on retail, and also the workplace, in terms of a massive reduction in terms of how we work, and the whole working from home trend as well. So I looked at actually some of the latest data from last week, actually from Google, and you can start to understand what impact COVID's having from a data perspective on our cities. And again, you can see the impact on public transit, the impact. Actually, we're seeing a massive resurgence in terms of how people use green space and parks in our cities. And I just looked at some of the data on the main retail areas in Dublin, where Grafton Street hit really hard, the kind of south side of the city, where we've seen traditionally very dependent on tourism and business, whereas Henry Street, the north side, picked up significantly in the last couple of weeks. Now, obviously, that's going to change, but I think it's interesting to start looking at data and using the data then to change the narrative in terms of how we respond to the crisis. You're looking at the traffic volumes in the city. You can see they started to dip down to about half of what we would normally have expected at this time of year. So these type of trends are really interesting and useful to understand and shape policy, economic policy within our city. And I guess the response we're seeing, and you're seeing it across cities around the world, is how do we change the way we prioritize maybe pedestrians and cyclists as part of a temporary COVID response, and you're seeing it particularly in Dún Laoghaire as well, with significant investment in walking, in cycling infrastructure as a result of the pandemic. But I think a really important thing is, as we make these changes, there are temporary. We need to make sure we're setting up the right infrastructure, data infrastructure, to actually justify the continued investment in these kind of mobility solutions. And I think that's where the smart city is really starting to come to the fore. And I'm just looking at some of the latest cycling data, and what we're seeing is these shifts in patterns, away from the commuter cycling to the more leisure cycling, suburban cycling, and you can see some big peaks there in the off-peak cycling trends across Dublin City, and that's kind of reinforced in terms of a big data set that we have access to from Strava. Strava, if you're running or you're cycling, you might have it on your phone, and you can see that surge in the blue line in terms of the number of cyclists. We're seeing maybe less trips, but more people cycling. And I guess we kind of need to make sure we realize this is as a long-term trend. So we want to make this sticky, that it's not something that we just see during the pandemic. And one of the exciting initiatives that we've launched in Dublin City Council, but this is available for any of the local authorities, is a kind of an app where we can engage with people who want to get into cycling or people who are new to cycling. So the Strava is the more kind of hardcore cyclists. This is for the, getting people into cycling and helping them, track your routes, understand the safest routes to get around the city, where we're investing in the new infrastructure, but also, showing and communicating with the cycling community where the new infrastructure is going in, encouraging them to try it out and give us feedback, and also gamifying in terms of, you can cycle every day. If you can do different challenges where we kind of encourage people to cycle in different areas of the city, you can get rewards. And this is a whole kind of interesting way in terms of how we use the technology to change behavior. And this is something hopefully that we'll see grow as something that lots of people in Dublin will use. I think in the space of a couple of weeks, we have nearly 1,000 users of this app. So it just shows you how quick we can adopt some of these technologies. And on top of that, there's this idea, and I talked about the big data, but we have a great relationship with Google, one of the biggest employers in the city. And one of the things we're trying to look at is how this then can relate to improvements in maybe reduced emissions, in terms of how does it address our climate action plans. And we can start using big data sets like Google to understand what's happening in our city at a macro level, and actually understanding, like, okay, are we increasing the amount of people cycling in the city? And if we increase it more, how will this, I suppose, impact our climate action targets? And this is really interesting in terms of how you can start modeling. So I'm going to show a little video which kind of inspires me in terms of the potential of these type of partnerships, and how we can collaborate to address things like climate action and use data to inform policy.
But without good data, even the most impactful ideas can't take hold. Google's Environmental Insights Explorer is an online tool built to empower cities with data to take informed action, making it easier for cities to measure, plan, and reduce the world's carbon emissions. Dublin City Council used Environmental Insights Explorer to implement smart transport policies to improve cycling infrastructure and track their efforts for sustainable modes of transport. Environmental Insights Explorer showed Mexico City its building emissions and the potential to generate over 4 megawatts of renewable energy from rooftop solar. And in Melbourne, Australia, it highlighted the solar potential to power the entire city. Google's Environmental Insights Explorer, helping create a healthier, cleaner future for citizens around the world.
So I think you can see I suppose the power of big data, but these partnerships can really help cities in terms of developing better policies and having a better view of what's happening in their city. And I think, another thing just to maybe flag is that there's a lot of, I suppose, new infrastructure going in around cities to help us get this better insight, this better data to inform policy. One of the other projects, when I talked about autonomous vehicles earlier, but some of the technology that's coming out of autonomous vehicles like radar and LiDAR based technologies are being now deployed, because it's driven down the cost of these sensors. And we're deploying these radar sensors across the city to actually develop better insights in terms of cars and bicycles approaching junctions in the city. And then using this data, then you can change the light sequence to give cyclists better priority at the junction, which creates safer cycling outcomes for cyclists in our city. So a lot of this is kind of starting to emerge, starting to scale. And this is another project that we have in the city, which is looking at, well, how can we use camera-based technology in a privacy by design approach using edge computing that can help us better monitor, traffic flows, classification, and who knows, could it potentially, help us address some of these type of blockages, where people are, parking in bus lanes and cycle lanes. And, really what I learned a lot about, smart city programs and new technology, sometimes it's not so much about the technology, but it's about the regulation, it's about the policy, it's about who pays for the technology, where does the money go for the fines. And I think we need to tease out a lot of these issues really to realize the large scale benefits of investing in the new type of technology. So, and this is an example in Amsterdam, where they have a scan card that can reach an average of 1,000 license plates per hour. So, there is a way to deploy these type of solutions. And I think maybe from a Dublin perspective, we probably need to be more proactive in terms of challenging ourselves, thinking about how do we really solve some of the big challenges in a way that can make a big difference for our city. So I'm going to just finish off just talking about maybe some of the innovation programs that we run. We love the idea of working with startups or smaller innovators that can help them create new job opportunities. And over the last couple of years, with partnership with Enterprise Ireland, we've put out a whole series of innovation challenges to the market and have worked hand in hand with smaller companies to deploy solutions in the city to test new concepts. And some of these are in areas like, how do we scale up cycling in the city, where we have a challenge fund. We're looking at a problem, we don't specify a technology, and who knows what kind of solution we could find. And in this case, we ended up working with a Northern Irish-based company testing a smart bike light that has artificial intelligence, machine learning built in, that can help us generate better data in the city in terms of where people are braking and swerving. We had nearly 2,000 cyclists trial these lights for us. We can get insights in terms of where this road surface is rough and where it needs to be improved as a priority. And also we worked with companies like AECOM to validate that this data actually can replace manual surveys in our city. So huge possibilities. And we have a whole series of these type of challenges. Again, logistics, hot topic with COVID, massive increase in logistics, maybe not so much in the city centre, but we've always had a challenge. How do we get that balance right between deliveries and white vans and that battle for curbside in cities? So we've got run a whole innovation program thinking about how do we look at the future in this space. And, the future is actually digitizing our curbside. It's actually creating, new apps and ways for delivery drivers to deliver and optimize and book times in a dynamic way in our cities. And this is a big deal. How can you make it easier to, reduce the amount of congestion in our cities by optimizing how they can access space on the curbside? And really, it's a real emerging, I suppose, opportunity happening that we see in cities around the world, particularly in the US now. Look at how they manage Ubers and taxis and deliveries for this, I suppose, prime space in their cities. And I think we've been testing some of these technologies, just some examples here. But this, how you digitize the curbside, is actually a game changer. What are the rules? How do they change between 10 and 12? Or is it a bus lane at certain times? Do you want logistics to change depending on what's happening in the area? And I think by doing that, then, very simple example is, where you have a bus lane that's not a bus lane and you have a parking app. How can the data from the curbside communicate to the parking app, or your car that, can communicate to digital curbside? How does it know when you can't use that space, and then you don't get a ticket when you didn't want it? So yeah, I'm going to just maybe fly through this because we're running out of time, but there's a whole wave of innovation happening in logistics, sustainable logistics, that we're trying to kind of empower the city, the different departments, and give opportunities to business to work with us to test some of these solutions. And I know Connor's probably going to talk about some of the stuff happening in Smart Sandyford on smart mobility. How do we look at the opportunity of mobility as a service, with all the different, I suppose, bikes and cars, and how do we fuse that together to make it easier to get around? A lot of this work we're doing through Smart Dublin with different partners like MasterCard, City Possible, and I think it just brings us to the point in terms of the technology offers a great opportunity. COVID has accelerated the need for us to invest, to have the better data. There's a lot of disruption happening. There's a need to really think about what we want to get out of the technology. How do we shape the future in a way that is not driven by an Uber or someone else, but it's actually driven by the needs of citizens, communities, and cities, and businesses and local authorities. And I think it's clear that it's moving so fast. We need to sometimes step back and think about what we really want to get out of it. There's ethics, there's privacy issues, and it's actually just doing the right thing as well. So that's not probably the type of signage we want to see in our cities in the future, and that's definitely not the type of solution we want to see driving future applications. But I think what I've kind of highlighted really is there's massive change happening in the last 5 years. There's a huge opportunity, particularly in districts like Sandyford, to embrace it, to offer value and opportunities for companies, but deliver brilliant outcomes for businesses, for citizens, and deliver great services. And I'm very excited to be part of this discussion today, and wish you all the best for the rest of your week, Connor, and the Sandyford Business District crew.
Smart City Programme Manager, thank you very much. Jamie, one of the common themes that we're hearing, it came up yesterday with Tara Buckley, Director General RG Data. You mentioned it again today. It's collaboration. And collaboration is key, to get buy-in from as many stakeholders as possible, and the relevant stakeholders. And without collaboration or buy-in, it's unlikely, that project or concept will get off the ground.
Absolutely, yeah, and that's why these I suppose these smart districts are so important, because you really, business, you want to find out what the needs are from business, from community groups. But, you guys have, some of the smartest, brightest kind of, technology companies, the different ideas that are being developed in the district. And then from a city perspective, sometimes we don't have the expertise in the big data, in the analytics, in, what the new technology trends are. So, but we know what all the problems are. So if you can fuse that and actually create an opportunity to actually do something that makes a difference and make it real. I always kind of like to say that, making it real, because you can talk a lot about this, Connor, but you know that until someone sees it physically and actually sees what it could do, that's where you start getting the scale opportunity. And I think it's just people being progressive and actually being open to collaboration, because if we just continue to work on our silos, it's definitely not going to be a future that's going to be one that puts Dublin in a good position from a competitiveness perspective.
I completely agree, Jamie. Thanks for your contribution this morning. I know you're going to stay around. We'll have a Q&A at the end of this session. So thank you, Jamie Cudden, Smart City Programme Manager. Just before we move on to our next